Stephanie, welcome. Glad to have you here today.
Thanks, Lauren. I'm excited for the conversation.
Yes, and here I'm excited to hear your story and how you have landed in this financial services world as an advisor, a firm owner. You are a podcast host as well, so many things. And I'm also excited to really kind of pull back your story with the bend of how that, can help others that are interested in landing in financial services and kind of the plethora of things that folks could get involved with. So I'm going to hand it over to you. If you don't mind just sharing a little bit about your background and journey and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So I'm a 27-year financial advisor. I was a career changer. So you can start doing the math, right? I was 30 years old when I changed careers, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had grown up with a father who's a financial advisor, and I like literally did not want to do what he did. I was like, ugh, ick. And then I got in the real world. I'm like, oh, I kind of see how this could be beneficial to people.
Right.
Maybe I can pitch to him that I could work with him. Um, and of course, he was like, one of my kids is into the business. You had me at hello. I didn't really need to make my whole big pitch, but it wasn't all sunshine and roses from there.
Okay, so tell me more. I think it's fascinating that your father was an advisor. So you grew up in this world and you saw what that lifestyle was like and just that day to day. So okay, so how did that all go? So you gave the pitch, it was like, yes, please. And then where did it go from there?
Right. Then, like, I started in and I had to get all my licenses and everything. And they were like one role model, right? I mean, there were some other advisors in the firm, but really, it was kind of silos and everyone had their own
Yeah.
thing. So my father was my role model, and he has an MBA from a fancy school and I do not. And he's a natural born salesperson and I am not.
Mm,
And I was like, oh, shoot, I can't do this work because
yeah.
I'm not like him.
Mm,
And now I'm in this life sentence called family business. Like, what the heck am I going to do? How am
yeah.
I going to make this work?
Yeah. Um, we actually just did a recent interview too, where we talked about bringing folks in and on the family business side and the complexity of that,
Yeah.
right? So, what did that feel like? I mean, how did you kind of navigate those waters, right? Because there's this internal pressure, external pressure, and then this optics to manage that is a little different than just sort of like joining a company as an employer.
Totally. Like, if the optics were really big to me, he had long-term employees. I worked for like a couple months after I graduated from college. So,
Yeah,
8 or more years before, and some of the employees are still there, right? So I want them to think well of me. And I really made it a practice to ask lots of questions, try to learn as much as possible. I had nothing to bring. Like, I
right.
had no knowledge or anything. Um, but my father had a partner at the time and his son had joined, and he'd
Mm,
come from like an MBA background and he worked at a big company, and so he had suggestions right
right.
away. And I saw how that was received versus kind of the more curiosity part.
Yeah,
um, so it's kind of a blessing and a curse, right? Like, the good thing was I wasn't getting fired because I was the boss's daughter, right? Like, yes, that's a privilege, and it was tricky also, but
right.
my father had a lot of corporate clients. He did a lot of retirement plans and non-qualified type of benefit plans. So I didn't have to be in a sales role right
Mm,
away. Thank goodness I could be support for the plans, do the enrollment meetings, do one-on-one meetings with, participants, where thank goodness I didn't have to sell anything because I was terrified of selling.
yeah. I feel like it's funny because in this space, you think, oh, you get into the number side of it, right? Which there's a component of that. But the more and more I talk with advisors, there's so much more. I mean, there's a psychology side. You're working with people on like really personal, deep issues. There's a sales side, as you alluded to, too. It's such a people business. So how did you kind of like create that environment for you that felt safe to be able to lean in to kind of find your way despite all these other pieces that were going on?
Yeah, early on, I met someone. So this was like 1998. I
Hmm.
met someone at like a Chamber of Commerce event who called himself a coach. I'm
Uh-huh.
like, coach? What do you mean? Like, you coach volleyball? I don't understand.
Yes.
And then he said, just do a free session with me and you'll get it. And by the end of the 20 minutes, right, I was weeping. I'm like, I need to work with you. Help me, help me. Because I felt so stuck and I didn't know how to do it my way and I didn't know
Yeah.
how to get out. So that was really helpful. I worked with him for a couple of years, just kind of thinking through all the parameters of it while at the same time still doing the work, right?
Hmm.
Um, and it really was a gift to be able to have so many one-on-one conversations. Like, we
Hmm.
did the retirement plan at a hospital, and I would sit outside the cafeteria and talk with anybody who walked by, or I would have one-on-one meetings with everyone from the CEO to the people who cleaned the rooms.
Yeah.
And I felt confident in that type of environment because I understood the retirement plan
Yeah.
and they understood their life, right? So I feel like I could help in that way. So it was kind of the learning by doing. And if I, you know, messed up the one meeting, I wasn't going to lose the whole client because there was like 3,000 employees, So it was like a low stakes way for me to learn, which was really
Yeah.
helpful.
So sort of getting that outside counsel to be able to have that, I don't know, it's easy to be like very in the woods kind of thing, right? To have that bird's eye view.
Yeah. And I
I,
had no direct colleagues because everyone else was either an employee or
right.
an advisor who's been doing it for 40 years. So
It's
yeah,
just, there's too much of a gap. Um, I know I like that sort of observation, right? Because sometimes when you come in your particular role, if you don't have someone that's sort of adjacent, just a little bit, a few steps ahead of you, it's hard to be able to relate,
yeah,
especially for people like, yeah, I did that, like, just come on, get it kind of thing. And that upkeep.
yes.
Okay, so um, we always sometimes also talk about it's changing, but there's still a lot of men that are in this world. I know that you have a focus on specifically working with women, just sort of non-judgmental approach as well. How did you get to that, just over your career, and what did you observe to be able to kind of anchor in on that focus?
Yeah. That experience with the hospital really was instructive because back then, below the C-suite and the doctors, you
Mhm.
had majority women, right? Maybe you had maybe a couple women up in the executive ranks and women doctors, but not as much as it is today. But everyone else, right? The nurses, the technicians, the people working in the cafeteria, it was mostly women. So I had so many conversations with
Mhm.
women who had let some man in their life handle the big financial decisions, like the long term stuff, the investments, right? They probably pay the bills, but
Right.
anything bigger or future oriented, a lot of them delegated, and it didn't always turn out well, whether it's the husband who left for the younger girlfriend or a
Mhm.
brother-in-law who picked the investments that were right for him but not right for the woman, like
Right.
it just didn't always go well. And then I heard lots of sad stories about people being poorly treated by our industry, sadly, whether
Mhm.
they were, sold a high commission annuity and then the guy never answered the phone again, right? Like just too much of that.
Yeah. Yep.
And then the head in the sand approach. Like
Mhm.
I always remember meeting with this one housekeeper who was 62 years old. She had worked at the hospital for nearly 30 years and never signed up for the 403B because it scared her. She was terrified to compete with me.
It was the educational component. Just be able
it
to.
was it was like what's I don't understand what this means and how I sign up. So like she came in, we walked through the forms, I helped her figure out the decisions, and at the end she gave me the biggest hug. She's like, I was so scared to come see you today. And I thought, oh my goodness, that
Yeah.
gave me a lot of confidence because I'm like, I don't understand everything and I can't answer every question under the sun, but I can help women like her get
Right.
on the right track. That's
Right.
that was like a catalytic moment for me.
Are there things that you do that you feel like are unique in the way that you propose questions, the way that you help to educate this group, target that you work with? I mean, because being able to sit down and to be able to say, like, here it is, right? Here's my story, that takes a certain skill set and a nuance to be able to pull that out in a way that feels like like honest truth, like like you're like to really pull out that honesty, and then that's going to impact the quality of work that you do. So if you can't pull it out, you're not going to get to the right end result, right? And then that's going to
Totally.
impact, so it's like so how do you help to kind of like nurture and pull that out so that it does feel non-judgmental, and so that folks do feel comfortable having these conversations with you? Or there are certain things you're even doing to educate yourself so that you
Yeah.
know how to kind of like pitch those right questions?
Right. Well, I would think, you said unique at the beginning, and I don't think I am unique. Like
Mhm.
all the financial planners I hang out with kind of have a similar approach. And I have found those people over the years who really
Right.
have that kind of human first approach and the
Right.
life planning, right? I took some George Kinder training. I was like, oh,
Right.
ooh, this is cool, right? Like that all helped me.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I think it's creating a safe space to
Mhm.
like talk about the things. And I say right up front to someone who, comes in, they don't come in off the street anymore, but like they, Google me and set up a free chat. I'm like, we're going to have to talk about all the things because money is a means to an end. It's
Mhm.
connected to all the most delicate parts of your life, right? Your feelings of security, your relationships, your career, like all these things, it's going to be emotional. Like I
Right.
just kind of try to lay that out there right up front. And
Mm-hmm.
I tell them in the first couple of meetings, we're not going to talk about numbers at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm going to ask questions you know the answers to.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we do it is because the money should be in service of all those things, right? I want to get at what's important to you, what your priorities are, what your values are, what you worry about, who your people are. So we're going to talk about it all. So I just kind of, I don't hide it and sneak it upon them, right? Like it's just like on my website, I think it's very clear, like this is the approach we're going to take. And, people self-select then, right? If they're willing to have those conversations, it's a very vulnerable conversation, right? They got to get financially naked
Yep.
and talk about all the stuff. So I've had some people that I don't even know if I've had that many people that weren't into it. I just like it's
Yeah.
just how
If
I put
they're
it up.
there, they're ready to talk.
I think so. And
Yeah.
I have had people who've tried to refer people, like, oh, my cousin totally needs to talk to you. I'm like, she'll come when she's ready, right? Like
Yeah.
you can't force it.
Yeah. There's a firm that we've worked with and they have this centerpiece in their office. It's this coffee table. It's a really ornate coffee table, and they've got chairs around it. And it's very purposely set up that way because it's more of a conversation table, right? To be able to, it's circular, people all around it. It's not this sort of big, thick table between you and the
Yeah.
advisor or what have you, to just be able to just have these honest conversations. And then you can go to the conference table and go through all the numbers or what have you. So I like that. There's a warmth, right? Trust building component.
I used to imagine having like a series of offices around the country,
Mhm.
like in houses. So like, do you want to have this meeting on the front porch or do you want to have it, around the living room or do you want to have it at the kitchen table? But then of course everything went to remote
I
online. A
know.
lot of my
It's
clients are all
different.
over the country. So
Yes.
I don't need a space.
Yep, that's right. And sometimes it's just about having those conversations wherever you are, right? Which is
Yeah.
also a benefit to that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so you shed a little bit of light more on kind of like what that day to day is like, how you kind of help to build up your career. Could you share a little bit more about someone who I don't know, maybe they're thinking about getting into this space. They're thinking about getting into the advisor community. Maybe it's not even being an advisor. It might be on an ops team or in a different capacity. Where do you even start? And kind of what kind of things should you be looking for to help just sort of like learn along the way and vet fit?
Yeah. I think it's so interesting because when I first came in, I saw the one model being my dad, and I thought every advisor was like him and every advisory firm was like that.
Hmm.
And I've spoken to women who've come into different, structures of doing this
Yeah.
work. And maybe it's felt like a good fit, or maybe it hasn't.
Right.
And they've been like, oh, this doesn't feel right. I guess the industry is not for me. Goodbye. And I'm
Mm.
like, we still want you. We still need you. Right. So that's one thing I think I would say is like, there's lots of ways people do this work. Even two advisors in the same company, in the same overall structure, might have very different approaches.
Right.
So talk to as many people as you possibly can and
Mm-hmm.
kind of suss out like, oh, does this feel right to me? Does this feel kind of icky? Because we all know in every industry there are those who maybe do things more the way you would like, and those who don't.
Mm-hmm.
So and they might be sitting in offices right next to each other. So,
Yep.
and I think with anything, right? I advise my clients of this. Like, step zero is to get clear on what's most important to you, what you want. Like, what are you hoping to get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you like to work in this industry? Is it
Mm-hmm.
because you think you'll like make a lot of money? Okay. Like that's one route. Or is it because you're fascinated by investing? Okay, that's interesting. Or do you really like the people conversations? Right. There's lots of different ways. I
Right.
love it because there's always something new to learn. And
Mm-hmm.
I love talking to people and hearing their stories, right? Like that's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Um, but I think we have this reputation problem that it's all about numbers and spreadsheets and math and investments. And that's not it. Like you said, it's a very human conversation, a very human business.
Yeah, we had a dinner with a young woman who's, I don't know, maybe 2 years in her career, something like that, is entertaining, shifting bit like, offices, right? And we were, my husband and I were giving the advice of just, why don't you just cold reach out to people and just say, I'm new in this space and I just love to learn from you.
Yep.
I admire that maybe your best places to work company or that this, do you mind just giving me 30 minutes of your time to just share a little bit more? It's that giving back component, right? And
Yeah.
paying it forward, to
Yeah.
be able to help others. I've often spoke to undergrad classes and you see eyes light up when even questions of like, okay, what do you need to put on your resume and this and that? And I'm like, sometimes it's just about like putting your neck out there, like there's that piece of it too, but just asking questions as you're
Yeah.
alluding to as well. Do you mind sharing?
Totally.
Yeah, what there's so many industry groups too. Where would you recommend people start to even, be able to learn a little bit more online resources or maybe conferences or things maybe people are already in their career and they're in their seat, but where do they kind of help to continue to learn and be able to build these relationships with others?
Yeah. I mean, one resource that I think is really fabulous, and it can be for people new in the industry or people who've been doing it a long time, is
Mhm.
the externship that
Yes.
Hannah Moore and her company does, Amplified Planning. It used to be associated with FPA, and now I think it's just Amplified Planning doing it. It's a low ticket, pretty intensive, really like window inside to what the work is actually like. And
Mhm.
they have advisors in different, capacities speaking, and you learn different softwares. I think it's kind of a low stakes way to like try it out, to like
Mhm.
be able to sit in the seat or kind of simulate sitting in the seat of an advisor, of a financial planner, and see
Yes.
what that's like. And at
Yes.
the same time, that's not the only way to do it, right? Like, so that's one interesting way. It goes over the summer. I think it's starting up soon this year for 2024.
Mhm.
Um, and then there's groups, there's all kinds of groups, right? There's the Financial Planning Association. I belong to a group called the AGC, Advisor Growth Community. We've done a mentorship program with students at Michigan State
Mhm.
in the financial planning program. I think if you have one or two conversations and it doesn't feel right, don't give up,
Right.
right? And I remember when I was doing informational interviewing back in school, like always ask the person you're talking to, who else could I speak with? Who else
Mhm.
do you think it'd be a good idea for me to have a chat with? And then
Mhm.
your tree kind of builds from there.
Yes, there's so many conferences. Kids has got like a bazillion conference, list directory.
And a
Uh,
lot of them have free tickets for students if you're, in that phase.
mhm. NAPFA, of course, is
Yep.
a great resource. So
Yep.
yeah. Any other thoughts for folks that, might be kind of going, how to like vet out, you're going through an interview process, and they always say too, right? That they're just not interviewing you, but you're interviewing them. Things
True.
that you think folks should look for to be able to sort of feel out if it's the right fit or not.
Yeah, I think, if you can ask, what does an average day look like, right? What are the responsibilities of this task? Who will I be interacting with on a
Mhm.
regular basis? And,
Mhm.
what's the path from here? Like, is there a career path?
Mhm.
A lot of the smaller firms, right, that might be difficult for them to lay out for you, but it's still a good question to ask, right? You can say something like, I value continuing to learn and develop. What opportunities might there be, a couple years down the road?
Yep.
what
Those are
what could
growth
this
paths.
grow into?
Yes, yeah, so true. I know for folks that we're at a place where we're gonna, or we've offered them the position too. We've often offered, do you want to talk with someone else on the team just to feel what it's like? So
Yeah.
if you're in a place where I feel like, you've got multiple offers, you're trying to figure out what's the right energy. Because like, right, when you commit to something, you're committing. Just like when you work with an advisor, most advisors, especially in kind of the fee only space, I mean, they're working with folks for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's a long-term relationship, just like a career, you're working with them for a while. So
Right.
yeah, to be able to figure that out.
I think so, right? How big is the team? I
Yeah.
mean, my father used to say, like, we're a small group, everyone does a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Or, in a bigger firm, you might be really, in a small slice of the business, which could
Right.
be fine, but maybe even, will I have an opportunity to see other parts of how this whole business works?
Yep.
And to me, I don't want to put judgment on it, but a certain type of boss will be like, yeah, you're interested. I want you to see the whole thing
Right,
and
right,
really have an understanding of this career because they want you to stick around.
right,
They're
right.
investing in you.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I also just really appreciate just to sort of take a step back that I know you've been talking about kind of like getting into your career in this industry, but that you called out that part of your growth story was like you invested in yourself. Like you got a
Mm,
coach early on, and then now you hear where you are today and you're paying it forward, and then to be able to continue, I'm sure that theme continues, right? How do you continuously invest in yourself? As I tell my team, we're always learning. I'm like, I'm learning, like I don't have it perfect, I'm not
yeah.
over here like on some pedestal. I'm like, I totally am learning all the time. We're learning together, right? So I
Yeah.
really appreciate that you're like, I'm also constantly learning and being able to share some of those lessons learned along the way. So,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's exciting. And also at the beginning, it gave me fear like, oh, shoot, I don't know enough yet. I can't go advise a client.
right.
Like, ugh, I don't know all the answers. And I remember the day I was talking to a surgeon at this same hospital, and I was so terrified he was going to ask me a question I didn't know the answer to. And he
Hmm.
asked me a question, and I asked him like a clarifying question back. And it
Hmm.
turns out what he really wanted to know wasn't the initial question that I was like, ugh, I don't think I know the exact text treatment of this exact thing. When
Right.
I asked, oh, that's interesting. Why do you ask? It was
Hmm.
something totally different. I was like, oh, even with my knowledge, which I feel like isn't big enough, it's still more than this surgeon
Right.
knows. I can be helpful to this person.
Right.
So,
And be able to help kind of guide them down that path. Sometimes I feel like
oh,
folks, they'll say things, but it's about the listening and the being able to, as you said before, kind of guide people down that right path because of experience. So,
yeah, totally.
than done. So,
And I don't know, my approach is always like, I'm not telling the clients what they have to do, right?
yeah,
We're collaboratively coming up with a plan together because
absolutely.
they know their life and what they're trying to accomplish. And I know the language of the financial world and the different tools and the different, trade-offs and pitfalls. And
Mhm.
together we come up with the action plan. So
Yeah,
I
it's
don't,
that
I don't have to
partnership.
know all things.
Yep. Um, Well, so fun. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for sharing, about your background and your journey to get to where you are today, but also just some, tips and tricks for folks that are thinking about potentially getting in this industry, maybe even thinking about like making a shift and where to start or what have you. Any other final thoughts that you think would be helpful to share? Or
Oh, I would just say that, I've talked to women before and I tell them what I do and they're like, I can't do what you do. I'm bad at math. I was like, I got calculators, I got computers. Like the math is not the thing, right? It's the
uh,
really diving in and asking questions and then just shutting up and listening.
mhm,
Money is so fraught, right?
mhm,
It's a neutral thing in principle, but it's not neutral. We have so much baggage attached to it, so
mhm.
many stories we picked up from our childhood, so many, kind of valuations that the world puts on it that
Yep.
it's really makes decisions challenging for people. And if they don't have someone to talk to help them figure it out, they can just cycle around in their own heads. So it
Yep.
it really is a lot of that, right? Walking with someone, like you were saying, as opposed to directing them. And that's so fulfilling when you
Yep.
can see someone take steps forward when they had been frozen before. It's
Mhm.
really a very rewarding career.
Ah, I love that. Thank you for sharing too. And also for folks that are listening, it's takebackretirement.com is where your podcast is at. Okay. So to get more in-depth tips and tricks, I'm sure a little bit more technical or maybe a little bit more, different topics or what have you, is a great place to start to hear more. So thank you again for joining us today.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.